for the invocation.
Good and gracious Creator of all things, guide the nations of the world into the way of peace. Guide the leaders of the world toward peace and for the welfare of all people. Guide us as well to work for peace and goodwill among nations. Let us respond with compassion toward the poor, the sick, the hungry, the oppressed, and those in prison, especially here in Winnebago County. Amen.
Vice Chairman Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to adopt tonight's agenda as submitted.
Motion made and seconded to adopt the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Carried. This time will be allowed for people that are present in the back for their opinion on any resolution or ordinance on this, on the agenda, as well as any matter other than this body has its jurisdiction. So, and you'll have 2 minutes. You may stand, state your name and address, and speak to the board.
Hi, my name is Kate Hancock Cook. I live at 216 Bosworth Court. And I bring from the world of women, I wish you happy Women's History Month. I've been surprised in my short time on the board that the formality of our proceedings is inconsistent. We are very careful to use titles for supervisors who are elected to the board and other board members. And yet, in these meetings, there are some glaring omissions of the use of titles, which surprised me. An example is our corporate counsel, who is a highly qualified employee, has more degrees than most of us here, and she is referred to by her first name. Our city clerk, who is elected by more votes than any of us here, I'm pretty darn sure, also is referred to by her first name, not by, we could use a title, or we could just call her Mrs. Bartels. And we choose not to. The clerk's staff is constantly referred to as the girls. This is something in corporate America that we said we shouldn't do in about 1985. That demeans the work that they do, which is vital to our county, and you all know this. They can be referred to as the clerk's staff or the team of the clerk's office, but the girls probably, I think we can do better. And I hope that you'll consider that when you start using addresses. It doesn't mean you have to be always that formal outside this room, but this is a place where we choose to be very formal with our supervisors, and everybody should be treated the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the audience that wishes to speak to the board? Is there anyone else wishes to speak to the board? Anyone else? Is there anyone on Zoom? No. That part is closed. Communications from the clerk's office.
Good evening, everyone. We have a notice of claim from Peter Sanger from the Progressive Group of Insurance Companies on behalf of Samuel Eggleston, who was involved in an accident with his vehicle from a highway department plow truck. We have a resolution from another county, from La Crosse County, advocating for expanded inpatient behavioral health facilities in western Wisconsin. And then we have 2 petitions for zoning amendments. The first one is from the town of Algoma on behalf of Darren at Barony to rezone from R1 to R3. That'll be referred to planning and zoning. And then the second one is from the town of Neenah for Mark Bigger to rezone from R2 to R1, and that one will also be referred to the Planning and Zoning Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Is it done? Vice Chairman Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to report that that committee will be held, I believe. Pardon
Want
me.
to start again, it wasn't on.
Pardon me?
Want to start again, it wasn't on.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Bear with me a minute here. I want to get the date correct. March 24th, which is next Monday, 8:30 a.m., Calkins Center. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Task Force on the Rules had their meeting on March 13th. We are going to have another one. I first and foremost want to thank everybody after JPS and the Special Orders meeting for their feedback. I had quite an extensive conversation with the Office of Corporation Counsel. There have been some that have indicated that they wanted to know either a number or names of supervisors that were either in favor of something or not in favor of something, or that wanted to see something advance. And I'm just making up names at this time. For example, if I were to indicate that it's Supervisor Swan, Supervisor Binder, Supervisor Patterson, Supervisor Stafford, and Supervisor Nussbaum had all indicated something, I was deeply concerned that I may be creating the opportunity for either a negative quorum or a walking quorum. That is an area that I won't go. I don't have attorney-client privilege that is only afforded to the Office of Corporation Counsel, but I'm not going to tread in that category. So with that, I would absolutely encourage you to please continue to reach out on anything that you see that you would like changed or possibly submitted or amended. And with that, our next meeting is March 27th, and then there will be a brief discussion at JPS in April. Thank you.
Supervisor Bender.
I was at the NACO convention last week, and it was quite interesting. There's a lot of uncertainty, the cutting the programs, the SNAP program, Medicaid, and one of the biggest ones for the counties would be the tax-free municipal bonds. They're thinking of maybe getting rid of that, and that would cost us probably 1.5% to 2% more on everything that we borrow. Over 10 years, the federal government would make about $880 billion, but it would come at the expense of our taxpayers. So it's not like you're going to basically rob Peter to pay Paul. We'll pay the federal government, and if they cut back on the funding from the state, naturally it's going to come downhill and fall back on us. We talked to like 5 different congressmen and 2 representatives for the senators, and like they all said, they don't want to cut programs, but the federal government, it takes about $7 trillion to operate the federal government in 2025, and the revenue is $5.1 trillion. So somewhere they have to find $1.9 trillion unless we want to owe $38 trillion instead of $36 trillion. So eventually we have to make cuts, and one of them referred to Bill Clinton. He balanced the budget in 1993, and he cut 277,000 positions, and by the time he was out of office, over 300,000 positions. So what they would like to supposedly do is look at the programs and see where cuts can be made and try to basically save as much money as they can through cutting programs and people, and the rest will have to get in taxes. I mean, it's inevitable. We cannot continue to run a $2 trillion deficit forever, because when they stop buying our treasury bonds, we're not going to be able to pay our bills. So I wish there was better news to tell you, but there was no good news down in Washington.
Supervisor Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The UW Fox Cities campus trustees meeting on the 24th, a decision has not yet been made on whether we will have that meeting. We'll have that decision by tomorrow. Thank you.
Supervisor Bender, did I catch you right when you had your hand up probably? Or did you want to speak again? Okay. Is there anyone else at this time? Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? Okay, we'll close that part. Next up will be our county executive report and appointments. Don't believe he has any appointments, but. Turn it on, Zoom.
There we go. Now it's on. Hello. I want to address a couple of agenda items, agenda items specifically first, and then if there's any questions on agenda items, I want to do that before I move to my next 2 bullet points. So one thing I know we are bringing forward Winnebago County's first strategic plan ever. tonight, and just a couple things, points that I want to make clear. Strategic plans are a living document. There's no such thing as really a final draft. It is something that kind of adjusts as we go. So as our needs move, it's something that you can adapt. I think what is proposed, what was brought forth from that strategic planning session is a really good start. And I'm really kind of proud of some of those pillars and priorities that you guys talked about. The other thing I want to say is a strategic plan is really the function of a county board as a whole to pass. This is not a function of a committee or a function of an executive or a function of a department head. This is a function of this body to set the directions of Winnebago County. So you are creating the tracks so that we know where to drive down the future. So that is what I have to say on that specifically for an agenda item, and I'll open up to questions on any agenda items that anybody has, or strategic plan questions. Going once, going twice. All right, now on the agenda, is it the NACO updates first or the HELP program first? NACO? All right, so for NACO, it landed in the same time that we were doing our strategic plan session. So I prioritized, well, sure, the National Associations of Counties. So it's a really fantastic event to go to. It's a place, I remember my very first NACO event I ever went to. I saw just how expansive county government is. If you think states are the petri dishes of democracy, it is counties. For instance, I believe it's Georgia has something called a sole commissioner, whereas the executive and the governing body in one person literally gets up and announces to the county what their budget is. Loving, Texas, 64 people, and it still has this $24 million budget, mostly roads, and their sheriff was arrested for stealing cattle. So counties are truly amazing. One of the first events I went to was in Colorado, where Adams, Colorado County has 600 residents, all mail-in voting. They do it in their giant clerk's office, which also doubles as the DMV. That is a function of county government in Colorado. So there are many interesting things in counties. I met a good friend of mine, Holly Mitchell, was the chairwoman of LA County. She thinks that we're a little odd for having 36 supervisors. I think she's odd for only having 5 commissioners for 10 million people. They are full-time. She has 36 employees for constituent services alone for her district. But that being said, she has 2 million people in her district. LA County has recently went to referendum. They are switching to a county executive county. It passed by a thin margin. So they're going to go to 9 commissioners with 1 executive. And I've been trying desperately, but to no good effort of convincing Holly to run for the executive position. So thank you. So with that, I'm going to have Ethan and Reese both went out. We had a couple meetings with the Department of Transportation, FAA, some things concerning our airport and others. So I'm going to have them give an update here.
So we'll give, on the agenda for legislative next Monday, I have a much more detailed presentation that'll go into actual legislation and different things that are happening. But I'll just give you kind of an update of kind of what we do, at least what I do as staff when I go out to DC. One of the strongest things that we have is called intergovernmental affairs in every agency, including the White House. And so that is effectively our point of contact in all federal agencies. And so a lot of times I go out and I prioritize meeting with the intergovernmental affairs staff. And there's multiple reasons for that. We find that one, if you ask what are the priorities of the administration, particularly in a given grant, they will tell you what the priorities are that you can score a better grant. And so we met with the U.S. Department of Transportation And we had actually regional staff on the call as well. We were in person, they were on call. And we talked about kind of what is going to happen, what the priorities of the U.S. Department of Transportation is. The bipartisan infrastructure law included what's called surface transportation reauthorization. That is now due this year. So it was a 4-year authorization. So that's coming again. We expect, based on conversations with the chairman of the Transportation Committee, that it will be largely roads, asphalt only, and other things that may have been prioritized, pedestrian and multimodal trails, will not be reauthorized potentially by this Congress. And so that changes some of the ways that we think about when we have capital projects that we may or may not qualify for federal grants. But keeping a pulse with intergovernmental affairs helps us understand kind of what's available. And so while we were out there, we met with intergovernmental affairs of USDOT, EPA, and USDA in different capacities there. As you may know, we have 2 federal grants that are paused. Actually, I think there's 3 now that are completely paused. 2 relate to land and water, Department of Interior and USDA, and the other is in energy efficiency at facilities. All spending in the Inflation Reduction Act right now is paused by an executive order. I think we're up to 75 or 78 executive orders. The difficulty with the executive orders is they're not actually numbered. Like previous administrations, they are referred to by their title, which makes it difficult to quickly find them. So the NACO conference is their legislative conference, and they have steering committees, which they have Hill staff present, White House staff, agency staff. If you don't know anything about how Congress is kind of laid out, they have their traditional staff, which Supervisor Mitter mentioned, which is their district office staff. There's also committee staff. So a chairman and a ranking member both have majority and minority staff in each committee when they are in charge of the policy related to those committees and subcommittees. And so a lot of what the presentations are the committee staff, not the actual constituent services staff that come in. The constituent services staff are constituent services for their district. That's who you meet in the Rayburn or whatever building you're in. And then the committee staff are the ones that they're doing the bill markups, which is editing bills to move on, and then other things like that. So I went to environmental, Reese went to housing, and environmental has a lot of different things going on. And the net takeaway is there's a lot of litigation and most rules are paused right now, which isn't uncommon for transitions of presidentials. We typically see rules and lawsuits that are put aside until the new administration 120 days in to get their feet under them. One of the things I'll mention with a lot of the uncertainty that's out there is the Trump administration is going really, really fast. And the difficulty there is they don't have staff in place. The Intergovernmental Affairs Special Assistant for Intergovernmental Affairs at USDOT was her 8th day on the job, and we were there in March. So that tells you that sometimes when we have uncertainty where we're not getting information, it's because USDA, they don't have their appointee in place yet. I think they just got budget managed, the budget to the deputy and the deputy director for budget are finally approved by the Senate. So a lot of the uncertainty is largely the key staff are not in place, which makes it difficult to kind of meet and know where the administration is going. I will point out, if you don't know, that U.S. DOT Secretary is from Wisconsin, and so we think that's actually good for Wisconsin-specific issues. It doesn't matter the administration. Typically, having somebody from your home state as a secretary, we haven't had one. I think Tommy Thompson was the last one from Wisconsin that we had. We have had Wisconsinites in high positions. The other thing that happens is trade associations get together. And so I'm a member of 2 trade associations, the National Association of County Intergovernmental Relations Officers. Think of the intergovernmental affairs folks for the agencies, but for the counties. And we really went through kind of what are the effects could be of budget reconciliation, the continuing resolution, 2 weeks ago when we were there, we didn't know if the government was going to shut down or what was going to happen. We now know through the fiscal year, the government's going to stay open with increased spending primarily to just veterans. Everything else is using fiscal year 24 spending levels. The speakers at General Session, the VA Secretary Doug Collins was there. U.S. Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins spoke. And we anticipate, based on what she announced, prior commitments by the USDA to be held, meaning we have contracts from the prior administration. They're going to honor those. We just don't know when. There is some urgency because we have aid to farmers that are due in about 6 to 8 weeks. So we're still waiting kind of on some of those IRA monies to get the contracts to go through. Other than that, there was some senators, and again, the representative, the chairman of the Transportation Committee in the House is Sam Graves, actually a EAA member, travels to EAA AirVenture every year. He's a Warbird pilot. And so he was talking about the surface transportation reauthorization. And like Supervisor Binder said, the big issue is tax-exempt municipal bonds, which is 2%, 200 basis points potentially, to increase the cost of the insurance or the interest rate. This happens every decade or so, where they throw it on the table. They throw all revenue options on the table, and typically they don't change the tax-free municipal bonds. Hopefully they don't, but we will provide updates next week as well at legislative. And then the other big update is something that this board had passed in the past, was the County Veteran Service Officer Act, which passed and signed by President Biden. We met with Senator Baldwin, who's the lead author on that, not her staff, who is the lead author on that. One of the issues, and there's some issues with the language that make Wisconsin counties or counties like Winnebago, Dane, Brown, Outagamie, and Waukesha, who have lots of, not lots, I shouldn't say lots, who have more staff than 1 or 2 bodies for veteran services. It doesn't make us very competitive to get that federal funding. And so through the appropriations process, we'll be working on potentially freeing up that grant and working with the VA on implementation. And that's going to be important so that we can continue to do some of the work that our veterans have here. Proportionally, we have quite a few because of Oshkosh Corp and the university counties. Big employer counties have a lot more veterans than the average county. So that's important for us to follow there. The other thing I'd mention is if you can log into legislative on Monday, today, the Fiscal Bureau put out their summary of Governor Evers' proposals. So I have a presentation that I will talk about as many provisions in the governor's budget that affect counties as I can. And there are some, and then I'll kind of explain the budget process there. So at legislative, I'll give a fuller, some slides on NACO, from NACO, some federal updates. But the big thing too is the ways the governor's budget could impact county government and whether or not the legislative committee wants us to engage on any of those topics as it goes to finance, or the Joint Finance Committee. So other than that, I'll take any questions you may have. I probably don't have answers, but I will certainly try to get them for legislative on Monday.
Supervisor Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So for me, one of the bigger concerns I have right now is, I mean, there's so many, but the bird flu, it doesn't seem like we've got a lot of research or support going to tackling it. No plan in place. It doesn't feel like it to me. I read a lot, and I haven't seen any evidence that there's an effort being made. My concern then is it certainly isn't getting any better with this transition into a new government, new employees, right? New leaders, and probably less employees doing that work. So can you help us understand if there's a plan in place, and maybe not today, like you said, maybe you don't know the answer, but can you help us get after that?
Yeah, I do know USDA shortly after, I don't know if we were in town, if it was shortly after, we were actually in town for the State of the Union, which it was kind of weird to be sitting across from the Capitol while the president was speaking. I don't remember if it was before or after, shortly after we got back, USDA announced their egg price plan. I haven't read it. I can take a look at it. I also have a meeting, Jim Shell and I are going out next week for our FAA issue. I'm trying to get a meeting with HHS, Intergovernmental Affairs, and USDA, so I can put it on my topics. I have Sturgeon on my topics for Department of Interior. I'll add that to try to get at least some documentation, and then I'll reach out to the NACO folks on egg to see if they have anything.
Thank you. It's far more than egg prices, so I just want to make sure that you're aware that the issues are so much more broad than that.
Yeah, I know
Okay.
that, but
Thank you.
I know that there was stuff in the egg prices plan that related to that.
Okay.
So I'd say that as a starting point, not a,
Okay.
oh yeah, we have a plan. I have in my mind, I know where to kind of start looking. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Not seeing anyone else, I thank you. Is Reese going to say anything?
Actually, I think he should. This is the first time Reese has ever been to Washington, D.C., and considering that his father is the lead attorney for WCA, I said that he failed as both a father and a patriot. So it was good for Reese to actually get there and tour the mall. So you want to say anything about that, Reese?
Sure.
In the microphone. Get up here. Reese went to the housing study, which was...
Yeah. So I'm not a member of any of the big associations like Ethan was, so I was more so going to a lot of the general sessions or informative committee meetings that were happening inside the NACO conference. And I'll be talking about it a bit more in detail on Monday. I'll be able to have a lot of my handouts that I'll be able to show you guys where it goes into a lot of the more nitty-gritty numbers just in terms of housing prices and then the benefits of having mixed developments and how different types of housing attract different types of people and how those demographics of employees at different firms are usually looking for different types of housing. And it talks about how you can really kind of focus in on your community or region and focus on one or two different types of housing depending on the workers you're looking to attract, where if you're looking for younger professionals who might just be coming out of school, you're looking to build more community-focused housing, whether that be apartments with amenities, as opposed to if you're looking for seasoned workers and you're looking to attract already trained and already experienced talent, you might be looking at more subdivisions. So there's just a couple examples like that. I can't rattle the numbers off the top of my head, but they also talked about different prices for materials for building, because building has become increasingly expensive, and there's the issue of it's hard for builders to make a good amount of money if they're not building larger and larger homes with nicer and nicer, whether appliances or different types of rooms. So they went in detail with that, and then there was also some numbers and some handouts about how different tariffs can affect different prices, where tariffs from Canada could affect hardwood, and there would have to be other policy shifts in terms of how we handle our own lumber domestically to start building those houses, because you can only build housing frames out of certain types of wood. And then, there's also how we get drywalling for our houses. A lot of people's houses have drywall, right? And where does the material for that come from? And how are we importing that from Central America, or are we investing in ways to produce drywall in the Southwest United States? So there's just some examples of that, and then also how different housing subdivisions and then the hidden and real costs of transportation can affect not only where you build the houses, but where it is most effective for certain types of groups, where some people might be more inclined to have a longer commute and pay more for gas if the roads are well maintained and if they have a job that they feel is one they're comfortable in and they're earning a wage that they feel is enough to justify that commute. And then how can you balance out the costs of commute as well as having good and healthy neighborhoods with those jobs you have in your community. So I'll talk, I know that was a little bit more in depth than I was planning, but I'll talk more about that on Monday at the Ledge Committee if you guys are interested. And then just going also with Ethan about some of our talks with the DOT and then different legislators' offices and policy goals for the new administration. So that was all good.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reese, when you were at the housing thing, and it makes sense that those who are in construction need to make bigger and bigger pieces with upgraded appliances and so on to make a decent income. However, what did the housing meeting say about how that impacts communities that need mid-level affordable housing for mid-managerial kind of workers, pharmacy store managers or support staff at a school, or those people who are fully employed but not making the kind of means that it takes to buy one of those McMansions. Did they mention how they intend to respond to that housing crisis and for those people?
Yeah, so they did. I'll be able to talk about it more in terms of concrete actions that were proposed or tried and true methods that other counties. I know that there was a large coalition from Georgia there who had created several mixed development communities that they saw success in when you're talking about those workers who are not able to afford, the $2.5 million house with the 5-car garage, or instead looking for a place with a nice neighborhood where they enjoy their job and they want to keep working at that location and doing their same thing, but they're not. They talked about basically making sure that you're not driving people out of a workforce when you start building these communities, and that also ties in with the commute. So I'll be able to talk about it a bit more on Monday with actual concrete actions, but that was discussed on how you can make sure that people who might not be earning exorbitant amounts of money are still able to live in those communities and how you can keep those people and retain those employees. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Supervisor Hancock-Cook.
Hi, thank you very much. I just wanted to highlight how timely this is. The NENA Planning Commission just completed their building study for the city of Neenah, and housing study, excuse me, and it talks exactly about what you're talking about. Really, you only need about, a third, maybe to a quarter of your housing to be single-family housing, and you need all these other kinds of housing. And the challenge that Supervisor Powers raised is how do you make sure that you have those other kinds of building happening? And I'll look forward to listening to what you have to say at the Legislative Committee. Thank you.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to draw people's attention to that's a very local housing study just completed. It's available through the Planning Commission in Neenah.
Yeah, and my hat goes off to those people. They talked a lot about ArcGIS maps, and I know you guys all have access where we've had different people come up and talk about using ArcGIS maps, and you can look at your property line, what kind of planning you have. And I worked with ArcGIS when I was in college, and I was not very good at it. So hats off to those people who are able to make maps. I was not that proficient, but no, it is really interesting the amount of data you can get, and it's very visual, which I find is really nice. Where you're not just looking at a table of numbers, where it's very easy to gloss over a table with numbers and the age ranges. But when you have different zones and you're able to see what should go in each zone and what industries are around each zone, it's really helpful. And again, I'll be able to talk about that more on Monday, but they did provide helpful links that you guys all as county board supervisors are able to go to, and you're able to look at different things, and it can break things down by median income or median housing price, the age demographics, or how many families, what's the percentage of families in an area. And so that's a really helpful tool that I'll be able to show you guys on Monday. And then whoever misses that, I'll be sure just reach out to me and I can send you the link, and then any memos I received from those presentations in that meeting, I'd be happy to share with you guys if you want to take a look.
Supervisor Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Reese, I just want to take a second and thank you. You said it was going to be a brief little summary, and it's clear that this topic drew your interest. You spent a lot of time talking about it, and clearly you've learned a lot, and I'm thankful that you were paying attention. You're willing to share the information that you learned in Washington with us. I look forward to seeing what you bring with us on Monday.
Yeah. And I I went and saw the museums too when I had a free evening. So if you have any questions about natural history, art, or American history, feel free to ask. I might remember an exhibit, so it'll be all good.
Well, thank you very much.
There's an internal office argument whether that's actually the Francis Scott Key flag or not, and me and Reese think it is. All right, next bullet point was the HELP program. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the HELP program, why it came to the board last month. Again, I am disappointed that it did not pass, but I just want to let you know some of the things from our end, and I went through that meeting. I probably watched that 3 times to try to understand a little bit. So I want to address some of the things that were brought up in that discussion. Mark talked about the funding for the position was in place until the end of the year. And even though the positions ended at February 28th, that was not actually accurate. I know Director Topol talked about immediate layoffs of these positions were not made permanent by February of 25th. Again, that was not true because project positions are for 2 purposes only. Either it's built in to fit a project or it's built in to fit a pilot. So this was actually both. So the neighborhood investment grant that we appropriated at the board funds till the end of 2025. It was fully put into the budget for 2025, so the funding and the authority was there. However, it also had a pilot aspect to it. So I think when we try a pilot program in Winnebago County, we should give it 2 years to make sure there's good data there. And then at the end of the 2 years, that's when we should make the decision whether we're going to make it permanent or not permanent. So at that point, either we say it's not working and we cut the positions, or we say it is and we put it on the TO. That is kind of part of the budget process. So I'll get into that here a little bit later. I want to take these concerns one at a time. So current project positions receive the same benefits of a full-time employee. That is not true, but that was not our focus of why we were bringing it forward. I just wanted you to be aware of that. The psychology of the employees would benefit from having the positions made permanent was a concern. Although that is true, I am more concerned of the psychology, the psychological effects of our people that are out there struggling. There are a lot of people out there struggling with housing instability right now, and I would like for us to say yes, this is something we're gonna look at and then address it in the 26 budget. Mary Ann, I said we couldn't consult the committee because the position would be gone in 3 days. Again, we had the authority for that to go to the end of the year, so we could have done that. Just wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. Some of the board comments that were brought up, overturning Act 10, recent federal policy leading could reduce available funds. While that could be true, priority-based budgeting was going to help us really figure out allocating those resources as we go. If we can't afford it in 3 years, that's not a reason, I believe, for us not to help people for 3 years. So when we get to the point of making those decisions, we should absolutely make those decisions when that time comes. Extension or change of employee status for project employees is a matter of budget session. Yes, but so is that. So we are getting ready to get into the 26 budget session. So by making them permanent, you're saying, yes, we expect you to keep this in the budget for the next year. Every year during a budget cycle, you have the right to add or subtract employees. So every year you have the ability to do that. Again, it was just my belief that at the 2-year project, we had enough data for us to say this is working. I don't think it would have been appropriate for me for the 25 budget to say, hey, we have this pilot program that we say we should take 2 years of data and cut it short, make that decision in a year and a half. We should give it the full 2 years. So we made it a priority by having the funding in the 2025 budget, but I think for a project position, we should wait for the 2 years to make sure the data is sound for 2 years before we make it permanent. And that is really, again, the premise of a project position is either to complete a project, in this case was the neighborhood investment grant, which ran till the end of 2025, or a pilot to see if a program will work or not. Do you have the data for that? The other thing was talked about, if this measure wasn't passed, these project positions would have been vacated. again, we had the authority. That was never on the table. I don't want you to feel like we were bringing it at the last second to say you have to pass this or these people are going to be gone. If that were the case, we would have came in January. If that were the case, or before that to say, hey, this is coming, but it wasn't. We just wanted to put it on the TO so we can make it resolute for the 2026 budget, and then again, if it doesn't work, we could take it out then. And the last thing, board discussions on extending the position until the end of the year is fine, but if you go further, you do have to watch what you can't tie future board. So you can allocate it for a project position for 8 years, but the very next board has the right to say, nope, we're not doing this anymore. So I look forward to making sure this is in the 2026 budget. I do appreciate that I didn't hear anybody make the discussion saying that I didn't agree with the program, or I didn't agree with the people, or I didn't agree with the purpose. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit more history of why we brought these project positions mid-year to put them on the TO, and what the thought process from my office was on bringing that forward. And that is
Supervisor Holt.
Thank you. First, thank you for the explanation. I appreciate you addressing all of our comments during that session. I think part of what I realized after the fact, I'm really big into analyzing why things went the way they did. And I think part of it was that we weren't all making the connection between the program successes that had been highlighted for us and the positions becoming permanent. And so perhaps we need to do a better job of conveying, and this is what it's going to mean after we review those successes of the program. So that's just a little feedback for you. The second question I have is pretty basic. What's TO?
Table of organization.
Thank you.
Yep. And address your first thing, and that was a misstep by me. I did not expect that to, I didn't think that was going to come off the consent agenda. We had a presentation, everything seemed positive. It passed board of the Human Services Board unanimously. It passed Personnel and Finance unanimously. I would have prepared more if I thought it was going to be contentious. I didn't think it was.
Yeah.
When I look at, it's always prevention versus long-term care. Prevention is cheaper. So the estimate of a homeless person in a county between all levels of government, federal, state, county, and municipality is $32,000 a year. So if we did save 870 people from becoming homeless times 32,000, that's a lot cheaper than 500,000. We could have made those arguments of why it was. I should have been better prepared. But again, I didn't have anything in any discussion in any of the committees where I thought there were, or the discussion last month. There was nothing really said negatively about the program.
No.
Right? So it was more of the why now that I missed.
Yeah, I think it was making the connection.
Right.
And yes, you're right that background could have been set up to share, as a reminder, those program successes. So thanks for listening, and thank you for explaining table of organization to us.
Thank you.
Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for clearing up some of those things. I have a question about the agenda item report that came with that. It said that the success rate of the program was 96%, and I'm getting a question that's not right. Can you explain what the right number is and where things got?
I do have. So there was that got missed by Sarah Brown and by Bill. So I have. Ethan has been actually addressing that with Bill today, kind of figuring things out. So do you have?
I have it.
You have it. All right. You have the explanation.
Yeah, Bill wrote the report, and he and I can't figure out where the 96 came from. He thinks that it came from a conversation several months ago, and initially we had, if you got to us early enough, you were in your house, you were in your apartment, on your path to eviction, if we had that intervention, we were really highly successful. But I think they kind of got so busy they stopped tracking that type of work, and they started just tracking those who have intensive case management, how many stay housed, and that includes those at risk of losing housing and those that are already homeless or unsheltered or couch surfing or whatever you want to call that. And so those numbers, Bill and I went through with Sarah Brown and Lou Shear. We may have talked to Beth, but I think she was on vacation. The numbers were the accurate numbers, and we are correcting with the Oshkosh Herald that he and I have been going back to today. One of the 190% increase in the average daily phone calls from 23 to 24, which is why I think that 96% number we kind of stopped tracking that. But it ends up being, I'm trying to find it real quick here. Over 2 years, 713 people have received intensive case management. And of that number, again, that includes both at risk of losing current housing and those unsheltered. Of that number, 73% maintained housing or found housing. And so I don't know what percent of that 27% were unsheltered prior or who lost their housing. The point is, and the point of the 96% was to say if we get to somebody early enough, and you heard Beth talk about it. Sometimes, like quite literally, the person calls us and says, I'm going to get evicted, and we help them call their landlord, and he's like, I'm not planning to evict, or she, or whoever, and there just needs to be a conversation. Sometimes and so there's really no case management there. Or sometimes it's, well, we could just help you talk to your landlord and get 2 rent payments a month as opposed to 1 so that you can help budget. Sometimes there's not intensive case management. And in those cases, we're highly successful. They don't even go to court. But, you know, Bill and I talked today, and he recognizes the error, and I think it was a quick off his memory and wrote it, and it didn't give the full context. And so rather than spending the time to track where that 96% came from, we've just admitted it was probably out of context, and in context, the 73% of all case managed folks stay in their house or have housing.
Okay, great, thanks.
I hope that helps. I've learned way more about the HELP program over the last 3 days and stats than I ever thought I would, but yeah.
Right, no, I appreciate that. I think for everybody, you know, sort of the program makes a lot of sense, and the, you know, what success rate in a program like this is good is sort of like hard to know since it was invented out of, you know, you're not benchmarked against 5,000 other counties doing the same thing.
Right.
So really appreciate that context. I think it certainly helps me understand it. Mm-hmm. The other thing is I went back and watched the January presentation, and my feedback is that after watching that, I didn't hear anything in that indicated that the program needed further authorization coming up. And I took for granted that I'm on the Human Service Board, and we had been discussing this month after month, and hearing about the successes in detail. And so I do think sometimes if you're bringing presentations to us with those ideas or those, you know, future intentions, being really clear that, you know, X, Y, or Z is coming up and when, can maybe get the board thinking about those things as we're hearing presentations.
Yep,
But,
I appreciate that
thank you
feedback.
so much for the time and attention to rectifying some of those things.
Yep, thank you.
Supervisor Mako.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. In the agenda presentation last month, there was a line that said that we were looking into a nonprofit taking over this program. Sometimes a nonprofit can do a program better than the government can, sometimes not. But are you still looking into a nonprofit to take over this program?
So that was the original intention of the pilot, is to build this. I mean, the community tried to do something called the hub a while ago, where things were kind of centralized and one person was helping connect to different services. But nobody wanted to follow another nonprofit. Nobody wanted to have another nonprofit be the lead. So during, again, the 2-year pilot position, we learned that this is a better fit for the county. Because we are kind of like Switzerland in the nonprofit world. They're all willing to come to the table and work with us, whereas sometimes there's some conflict and they won't come to the table together. Lou Shear is our housing grant coordinator in the back there. She was part of the Hub project, and she watched that kind of fall apart. She has watched Sarah Brown bring people to the table we never thought would come to the table together in a collaborative way. So that is why my position changed. I said, no, I think we should make this permanent. I think it is a good fit for Winnebago County. There are not a lot of programs we have out there where other nonprofits are willing to give us up to $100,000 to help people voluntarily. That is not taxes. That is them saying, you guys are doing a good job. This is what we've been looking for. This is what the nonprofit world has been looking to rally behind when we have United Way saying this is what we've been trying to do for 20 years, and you guys have accomplished that goal in 2. That's amazing. So, no, it is not my position anymore that this should be passed to a nonprofit, just because it is effective as us being the kind of neutral arbiter of these things countywide. I think originally up in the Needham and Ashe area, 11 was a little concerned that we were going to be competition for them. And now they're like, hey, you're a resource for us, and we're a resource for them. So it's actually kind of helping us not only bridge that divide between the nonprofits, but also cross that line between, is it double G, between Needham and Ashe, Fox Crossing and Oshkosh? Did we have an agreement on that? Is it G or double G? GG. We're going to say we'll say double G. So it's helping us bridge some of that too, which has been fantastic.
Supervisor Holt, second time on this.
Thanks. I've got one quick piece of feedback. So when you have programs, if you don't already do this, I'd highly recommend aligning with the committees probably on what's going to be measured and how, because I think that this was missing in the commitments, right, for this program. And if you had, say, stages of potential homelessness or unhoused or lesser housed people, maybe you could then measure the success rate based on the stages, and you'd be able to have that in the final report out, as well as in the beginning saying what your goal is, right?
Yep. Thank you.
Supervisor Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to build on what Supervisor Holt just said. I reflect on the help discussion, but also on the airport T-hanger discussion. And a general observation is how we make the case for approval, recognizing we've got limited dollar resources, they're taxpayer dollars. How do we measure success and define that early as possible so we know what success looks like? And then also the financial impact, not just the direct cost, but you just clicked off indirect costs, which actually dwarfs the direct cost, which again helps us, I think, recognizing we're making balanced decisions and investments. So that's, a general observation as I look across both of those. Just wanted to offer. Thank you.
Yeah, and one point to that, agenda item reports are new for us. I mean, they're 3 years old. About 3 years ago we started those, probably, roughly. April of 22. So now we build on that, and if we get, a strategic plan, and not only can we say the fiscal impact and what are the costs that we may be preventing down the road, we can tie it to one of the priorities that we have and say why we're doing it. Right. So we are developing a strategy to make these decisions for the future. So we're not done with them yet. They're still in infancy. They're in the infancy stage, and I appreciate any feedback that you guys would like to see be added to those agenda item reports. Thank you.
Supervisor Facetto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to touch back on something Ethan mentioned before regarding the avian influenza that's hitting around. Back in, I think it was the winter of 2015 and spring of 16 when we had an outbreak over here, the state veterinarian who worked at Department of Ag, Trade, and Consumer Protection was directly responsible for a strategic response to all of that here in the state of Wisconsin. And there was a connection between USDA and the other state vets throughout the country. So as you're looking at USDA's response, make sure you touch base with the state of Wisconsin to make sure that you have a full picture of everything that's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, and to address that a little bit, you know, as far as NACO goes, that has been a concern of theirs. And of course, there is an outbreak in some of these southern states. Well, we know birds migrate, right? So it's coming this way. So I do know that we have multiple departments that are going to be looking into that, including land and water for some of the agriculture things out there, but also for public health, because we have a lot of people that raise chickens in their backyard. So how do we make sure that everybody is educated? And if you're educated, you know what to look for. You know when not to eat the eggs and when you have to do something. But if you don't know, there could be some dangers. So, I mean, it's tying all that down from the federal messaging, just like you just said, all the way through our departments to our citizens. How do we make sure people are optimally aware?
Supervisor Dowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Goodness. I just want to touch on the avian flu really quick because the city of Menasha last year allowed backyard chickens, which has been amazing for our family in particular. And in doing research on that, the CDC actually says that they're not worried about local backyard chicken farmers. They're more worried about overcrowding where the animals stressed out in large factories. So in doing research for that, in the last 5 years between Winnebago, Calumet, and Outagamie County, there's never been a case of avian flu for a backyard flock.
Yep.
So just so everyone knows.
Yeah, I'm not trying
Okay.
to scare people because please, eggs are expensive. If you have chickens in the backyard, I might come over later. Right. But at the same time, people should know the signs of what to look for.
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
Anyone on Zoom? Okay, we
Thank you.
I have a few things tonight. Supervisor Gabbert is excused. I did talk to her. She's doing the best she can. She's doing rehab and all that, so she is coming along fairly good. I think about supervisors and not being here. There is no rule or whatever, but I know the task force is working kind of on one. If you can't come to like this meeting, either let myself as chairman or the clerk's office know. It'd be very nice just so we can say, well, excused. Because otherwise, when I read them off, them are the only ones that contacted me in one way or the other. But the big thing is the same way with committees. If you don't let your chairmans know, and then they come up with only 2 at their committee meetings, they can't conduct any business. So if you let them know, and don't let them know that morning, let them know a day or 2 ahead of time if you can, they can either get Vice Chairman Fryer or myself to fill in, and then they'll have a full quorum for a meeting. So, so be sure and do that. The other thing I have to say is something that you've got to remember: your computers are your computers. They're nobody else's. They're assigned to you. They're not mine or Vice Chairman Farey's or anybody's. They're assigned to you. What happened here last month is someone went ahead and went over, someone was missing, one of the other supervisors, and voted on that person's machine, which wasn't right by no means. That should have happened because you're touching someone else's machine, and that is not right. And whether that person would have voted that way or not, maybe they would have, maybe they wouldn't have. So keep your hands on your own machines. So please, just remember that is something that could be taken up, and I don't know what could be done, but that person, if they're not there, then they'll just be excused or won't have vote. Okay, at this time, we'll have a report on the strategic plan from Everett Strive Solutions.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Everything good? All right, slide deck is up. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you all this evening. I know some of you from the Board of Supervisors workshop we held in March, but if we haven't met yet, my name is Meredith Hauk, and I own EverStrive Solutions, and we have been working closely with your team on the development of your proposed new strategic plan. So we'll do next slide. There you go. Okay. I can click that if you want. Okay. That one. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So before we dive into the strategic plan this evening, I want to give you a little background about EverStrive Solutions. So we are a full-service public sector consulting firm based out of Kansas City, and we work primarily with local governments, nonprofits, and professional associations across the country doing work just like this. So strategic plans, team development, board retreats, executive coaching, things like that. My business partner, Lauren Palmer, and I spent nearly 2 decades working in local government management before opening EverStrive, and we've really enjoyed visiting your community and working with the board and your team. Next one. Maybe not. I got nothing. Always a tech issue. All right, so before I take you through the details of the strategic plan, I want to start by talking about how the plan was developed. And our process really has 3 key phases. The first phase is insight gathering, the second phase are the board and the staff workshops, and the third phase is the plan development and approval process. So during the insight gathering phase, we had the opportunity to meet with a variety of individuals throughout the county. Input was gained from a survey that was sent out to the entire Board of Supervisors, through individual interviews with a small group of Board of Supervisor members and county leadership, focus groups with the department leaders, and then finally a focus group with the community leaders, such as city leadership representatives, and then folks from the visitors bureaus and economic development corporations. The information collected during the insight gathering phase is used to provide context during the workshops, and it also gives us a starting point to begin our conversation. Do I need to pause for this? Okay. I'm going to keep going. It's all in the plan. All right. So following that insight gathering phase, we then hosted 2 workshops with your team. We had the Board of Supervisors workshop on March 1st, and then we met with your department leaders on March 3rd. During the Board of Supervisors workshop, we spent time defining success, brainstorming tactics, and completing an exercise to identify top priorities. That work was then presented to department leaders to review with an operational lens and to provide some additional context and ideas. From there, our team at EverStrive Solutions drafted the plan, and it's now before you this evening for consideration. While I know you have a full copy of the plan, I do want to spend a little bit of time with you this evening providing a high-level overview, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have at the end. So one of our principles at EverStrive Solutions is to always start with purpose. Before we can start executing, it's really important to know where we're going. So at the core of this strategic plan is a vision for a strong, sustainable future, one where Winnebago County is a place where residents thrive, businesses succeed, and investments are made with a long-term impact in mind. We've also heard some guiding principles come to light during this process, and we've included those as guideposts for you to consider as you move forward. These principles are simply a guide to help the decision-making process and help ensure alignment between priorities and action. So let's talk about the plan now. So your strategic plan is built around 5 key pillars, and we use the term pillars, but you could also call them focus areas or priorities, but these are the big buckets of work that we see you all potentially doing moving forward. Each pillar includes specific goals, key initiatives, and measurable outcomes to track progress. So I want to take you through each of those pillars now. So we're going to start with the first pillar, transportation. As we all know, transportation plays a key role in our daily life, whether it's getting to work, moving goods, or simply enjoying everything that you all have to offer here in the county. A safe, reliable, and well-connected transportation system is essential for economic growth and quality of life. So we want to look at it from both perspectives. Right now, Winnebago County has a strong infrastructure, but there are certainly opportunities to improve connectivity, increase access to a variety of transit options, and to prepare for future transportation needs. One of the first steps that we've proposed as part of your plan is a countywide transportation audit to identify gaps and help you all prioritize investments. Success in this pillar means that those within the county can move safely and efficiently, and investments in infrastructure support the long-term growth happening throughout the communities. The second pillar is housing, and as we've already been talking about tonight, housing just isn't about a place to live. It's about creating strong, stable communities where people can put down roots and businesses can attract a local workforce. Winnebago County, like many communities, is facing challenges when it comes to housing. So our goal as part of your plan is to ensure that residents at all income levels have access to safe, quality housing that fits their individual needs. needs. The proposed work under this pillar includes conducting a housing assessment to get a clear picture of what's missing and where investments could be made, working with the communities to streamline the development process, and also working with partners to educate the community about housing options. By taking a proactive approach in this area, the county can help improve the options available today and also support future growth. The third pillar is economic development. And based on the conversation that was had at the Board of Supervisors workshop, we really considered calling this pillar simply business friendly, but it is more than that. There was quite a bit of conversation about how to make it easier for businesses to start, to succeed, and to grow within the county. And what that means is ensuring that the infrastructure they need is in place. So things like access to broadband, transportation networks, childcare options. We also want to make sure that there are workforce development programs to capitalize on the folks that already live in the community. And then we want to make sure that we're collaborating with local businesses and partners like your municipalities, your visitors bureaus, and your economic development corporation. What we know is that when businesses thrive, residents thrive. More jobs, higher wages, and a growing tax base contribute to the ability to offer strong public services, and it creates a better quality of life for all. The fourth pillar is efficient government. The ability to achieve the goals that are outlined as part of your strategic plan really start with the county as an organization. And so as part of this plan, we have Winnebago County focused on modernizing services, increasing public engagement, and ensuring public funds are used wisely. A big part of this is making sure your constituents have easy access to information and have the opportunity to be involved and to share feedback. Financial stewardship is a key priority as well. By fully integrating priority-based budgeting, the county can ensure that funding goes to the programs that provide the most value for the community. And finally, good governance also means investing in leadership and planning for the future. That includes supporting professional development for elected officials and staff, evaluating the government structure for efficiency, and then making sure county facilities and infrastructure are well managed. The end goal here is really simple, right? We all want a government that runs smoothly, serves its constituents well, and remains financially strong for years to come. And then the final pillar is quality of life. You know, a great county isn't just about roads and businesses and budgets. It's also about the people who live here and the things that make this community home. Parks and recreation, arts and culture, public health and safety, all play a role in making Winnebago County a great place to live. Now, I will tell you, we heard a lot about the water in Winnebago County, both as a resource and as an amenity. So this pillar does feature a focus on water access and conservation efforts to ensure that this resource will be protected and available for years to come. Public safety, of course, ties into this as well. Things like emergency preparedness, crime prevention, and other safety initiatives that will help keep Winnebago County safe and resilient. So those are the 5 key pillars, but before we wrap up today, I do want to talk about what happens next and how you can use this plan moving forward. At its core level, a strategic plan is all about aligning strategy with action. It's getting everyone facing in the right direction. And our goal for this plan is not to be a document that simply sits on the shelf and collects dust, which is why we've worked with your team to develop an integrated process that can be used moving forward. So in addition to this plan providing direction for the next 4 years, it will also serve as a foundation for the priority-based budgeting work that you all have already started. And while some of the goals may stay the same, the tactics and tools will likely change over the next 4 years. So this is a fluid document. It's designed to be looked at every single year. And that's why we have encourage departments to align their work annually through a department work plan that ties back to the strategic framework. That's always helpful during the budgeting process as well. And then we also recommend that the Board of Supervisors and County Executive hold an annual workshop similar to the one that we did as part of this process to review progress and to set annual strategic objectives. So that concludes my summary for tonight. Before I open it up for questions, I just want to again thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I want to send a special thank you for your staff team for their partnership on this project. We really appreciated working with them. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Supervisor Holt.
Got to find you in the crowd.
I'm actually really excited to see this in a presentation format. Talking about it as a group was really inspiring and had my wheels turning for days, even weeks. So thank you. Thank
Yes,
you for your
thank you.
leadership and facilitation. I do believe so I know it's a living, breathing document that will be evolving. I do believe there's a step in here where we take this to our constituents and talk about what's missing or what, in addition, we should be identifying and capturing in their needs. So I think that that's a really critical step, and I don't want to wait until next year.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so that's my first piece of feedback. And my second piece of feedback is, in this, I think we really need to think about leading indicators, like leading measurements, not just those lagging measurements that have been identified as measures of success. Leading indicators, to me, are how we know we're headed in the right direction long before we have those results. And those are hard to come by, and I think the knowledge that you all have could potentially help each of the business area leaders to identify those leading indicators in case they're not familiar with them.
Thank you. Both really good points. So the first time you do a strategic plan, it's really a starting point. And what happens now over the next 4 years is you really get to dive in and play with this document. So I would encourage you to start public engagement as soon as possible. I mean, one of the goals is to increase the frequency of that occurrence, and this would be a great way to have a conversation. Same thing with measures. So we kept the measures fairly vague this time around because there's not a lot of data currently being collected. So part of the work over the next 4 years is to really determine what those metrics are, start collecting baseline data. So when you do the update to the plan, you can have really strong metrics that you're monitoring.
Supervisor Bender.
Just curious, like when we do a master plan in the Parks Department, a 5-year master plan, usually after we develop the plan, then we have a public input meeting to get the public's input. Would it be wise for us to have a public input meeting before we actually adopt this? I mean, we've seen the plan, but there's 172,000 other people live in this county that maybe, would have some input on what they would like to see, and we represent them, so I would just think for myself, I would feel more comfortable if we had a public input session, maybe even 2 of them. Like we basically would go up by Nina Menasha, we'd go to Armorough, we'd go to Winnebago, and we'd have one at the Coughlin Center. And we didn't get a lot of people, but we'd always get 5 to 10 people, and they were actually interested and wanted to basically give their input. And sometimes I think we don't rely enough on the public, and maybe it would be wise if we did that.
Yeah. So I will say that communities do strategic plans any number of ways. So we have an insight gathering phase worked into this process where we talked to a representative sample, so folks from key stakeholder groups, we worked with you all, and we worked with your county staff to put this initial draft together. I certainly think there's more opportunities to do public engagement around it. I will say it's not uncommon for communities to approve the plan and then go on like a road show to present it and start talking about like, okay, if this is the direction, what specific things do we really want to do? Or do you have some ideas? People typically have an easier time responding to something versus creating something from scratch. And so this document is a really great way to start the conversation. It's certainly up to you all, though, if you choose to approve it now and then begin those conversations, or to delay it and try to have those conversations first.
Supervisor Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few things. One is a compliment to Everlast, the staff, as far as the county executive staff, and all of you. I think beautiful simplicity really sets a strategic plan apart, because these things, being a wonk of this stuff, can be thick and confusing.
Yep.
And so that's the first thing I wanted to pass along.
Thank you.
Secondly, like all plans, unless we turn it to action, it's a piece, something that gets put on a shelf. And that's where, to me, priority-based budgeting links up to this so nicely.
Yep.
That's how we turn that into action and keep this thing living. One consideration I'd have, I'm putting my marketing hat on
Above
now,
it.
when I look at the 5 pillars, when I look at efficient government as a person who's not in this chamber, I know what that means. I can identify with it, but when I look at transportation, it's like we need a word.
Yeah.
Like housing, housing meeting the diverse needs. So in other words, consideration whether we want to take those pillars and maybe make them 3 to 5 words long so that you could explain to a constituent here are the 5 areas.
Yep,
And maybe it might be more descriptive, just a consideration.
Yeah,
Thanks. Thank you.
absolutely.
Supervisor Hancock-Cook.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and I really enjoyed the workshop as well.
Thank you.
I know that it is very difficult to get external input. Communicated with Director Roche today or yesterday, and she sent me how you had made attempts to communicate with numerous community members, and it was very limited on the response.
Yeah.
Not a big surprise, but I do think I would echo that we might want to do a little bit more on our own volition to communicate with our constituents and our city folks, our people. None of the city government in Neenah was involved, and I think that they probably might be interested in what we're looking at and want to give some feedback. So I would also say that that's something we should be doing. Thank you very much.
There's also typically a more of a willingness to participate once they've seen the process happen once. It's a little scary at the very beginning, not knowing what this is going to look like, what the reception is going to be at the Board of Supervisors, and so on. So again, I think this is a really great first step, and I'm excited to see the engagement and interest you can build moving forward.
Okay, we thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
for coming.
Have a good evening.
Is anyone on Zoom? I wasn't. Anyone on Zoom? Okay. Thank you. Next is consent agenda calendar. If I have a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
That's a motion made and seconded. Oops. Supervisor Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 129, where our corp counsel did a significant amount of research apparently in reviewing video testimony regarding whether or not a rent feasibility study is part of valuation services. She did not apparently, and I'm speaking for her here, she can answer me. She did not find a specific reference to a rent study as being part of valuation services, which would be.
This isn't the consent agenda, Mr. Supervisor Swan.
Well, where's the minutes approved?
In the consent agenda. Then you want it pulled.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, of
Okay,
course,
so
okay.
you want number 1 pulled then at this
Yes,
time?
I want number 1 pulled, I'm sorry.
Any other ones? Not hearing any. All those except number 1, we'll go ahead and approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Carried. We'll go back to number 1 now.
All right.
Supervisor Swan.
Okay, so just to resume then, on page 129, where our corp counsel did go through video testimony to see whether or not a rent study was specifically addressed in testimony when the ordinance was approved. She apparently did not find that, but I will say that in support of any asset management decision on a new property development, feasibility rent is critical and essential to determine as part of valuation services. So in my opinion, it is part of the requirement, under 3.145. So you may not want to change the minutes, but I disagree with them.
Now, we're just talking about the minutes now.
That's
So
correct.
it don't have to do with the minutes, and we don't need to discuss it at this time.
That's right. And I will say that the minutes that are reflected on page 129 are accurate because it does indicate that I confirmed by listening to 2 hours of facilities and property management meeting minutes or our meeting minutes in March of 24, February of 24, that there was no reference when this ordinance was passed, which was 3.145, to anything regarding rate lease studies. The focus was on basically property. And I would also point out 3.14 sub 5 specifically says the Facilities and Property Management Committee shall make a recommendation regarding the need for and type of evaluation services required and/or discretionary waiver evaluation services shall be administered by the county executive under 5917-2A. So in any event, in terms of the minutes are accurate based on my going and listening to the Facilities and Property Management Committee meeting in March of '24. It might have been February, but it was a 2-hour meeting. And I will tell you, the board meeting regarding this lasted maybe 5 minutes.
Okay, if I might just follow up quickly?
No, only the minutes. We're not going to go back and forth. Only
I
the minutes.
understand that.
Okay.
But I just want to get this right in my testimony, in that, you know, just because you haven't mentioned a rent analysis as part of valuation services and testimony does not mean it's not part of the valuation process and not essential to determine whether or not a development decision is appropriate. So, you know, I understand the fact that we may not have mentioned it in testimony, and I understand that the executive has the ability to decide whether or not we do valuation services, but it's under the purview of the Facility Property Management Committee to make a recommendation to whether or not valuation services are required. Thank you.
All I'm going to say on that is to take it to your chairman and have him put on the committee to make sure it's worded right.
I think my understanding is he will do that, but I just wanted to clarify.
I need a motion to approve the minutes from February 25th. Motion made and seconded for the approval. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay.
Nay. Nay.
I see 2 nays. We got 2 nays. I believe Swan and Bender, am I correct? Swan and Bender. Okay, business items. Resolution 108032025. Supervisor Burrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding resolution 0108-032-025, adopting Winnebago County fund balance policy, ... I move, again, just to make sure we have a committee to look at this, I move with unanimous consent to pull it, refer this resolution to the Personnel and Finance Committee for their review at their next committee meeting and bring back in April to the board. Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed say nay. Carried. I'm going to bring forward resolution 0109-03-2025, adopt the 2025-2029 Winnebago County Strategic Plan.
Second.
Been a motion made and seconded. Discussion. Vice Chairman Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me introduce the motion. I will move to postpone Resolution 01903-2025 to a date certain, and that date would be May 20th County Board meeting. Thank you. If I might, Mr. Chairman, have the floor?
Yes.
I certainly appreciate the efforts, and it's not my intent to render opinion on this resolution at this point in time. But I remind everybody, we have an election that'll be taking place in a couple of weeks. And I think it's proper to let the residents of this county decide who the next county executive will be before we take this up. I really think it's very important that we provide that opportunity, just in case the election is changed, or let me put it different, if we have a different county executive, they might have a different opinion on this. So I really think it's proper to delay it until May.
Any other discussion? You punched in. Supervisor Dowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to remind my fellow supervisors that the strategic plan has nothing to do with who the county executive is. However, it is our representation of our community, and we should be separate from the county executive. So I believe we should move forward with this. It doesn't matter who the county executive is. We speak for our people. Thank you.
Supervisor Holt.
Mr. Chairman, I concur with Supervisor Dowling on that topic. I believe that we understand our community needs and have voiced the concerns of our community. Although I would like an opportunity to speak to my constituents about the strategic plan and to gather additional insights, it doesn't change for me those priorities that we've established. And I feel strongly that we need to set that direction. That's our job as the county board. Direction setting is a requirement for the budget setting process, where they're trying to prioritize based on the direction we set. I don't think delaying it for certainly a county executive election is going to change anything.
Supervisor Hintz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because of my experience with the city of Oshkosh and being on the city plan commission, we had to operate off of a comprehensive plan. And that comprehensive plan was in place, no matter who it didn't change when we changed directors of planning in the city. And it was also something that we could alter on the fly as needs came up. And I look at the strategic plan for our county very much the same way. And it is our job to set policy. It is whoever wins the election in April to implement that policy. They don't get to come in and set the policy. That's our job. So I think delaying this is something that we definitely do not need to do, because then we aren't doing our job that we're elected to do. Thank you.
Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to share some of the sentiment with my colleagues here, that the strategic planning session was excellent. Loved some of the ideas. Had a lot of smart people in the room, and I'm along the lines of some of the other comments I've heard tonight, that there's 170-some thousand other smart people in this community, that their kids, their grandkids, businesses that reside here have input in what this county looks like and what the shape of this county looks like in the future. So I tend to agree with Supervisor Fari on pumping the brakes on this a little bit, for the fact that I wrote it down under one of the pillars was, under efficient government, was enhanced transparency and community engagement. We're not really enhancing transparency and community engagement if we haven't engage the community in the strategic plan yet. So that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for bringing this forward. I hear both what Supervisor Fari is saying and what Supervisor Holt are saying. However, I guess I'm going to be more inclined to lean a little bit towards with what Supervisor Buck said, because this isn't an indefinite postponement. It is only until May. I don't see exactly where postponing this is going to cause any harm, because there's no date specific in the strategic plan. So 60 days, I don't think is going to make that much of a difference.
Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Supervisor Hanson's touched on something new here, that this is to set us up on the right foot for the budget process. And I think that's where my interest in voting yes for the motion to postpone comes from as well. Setting us up on the right foot with what we think this means, what this document means, and how it guides our decisions, but also how the public and staff sees this, is really important to making sure that it's done successfully. I haven't been on the board as long as some other people, but I've been on longer than others. And in my time, I've seen when big things get rushed, even if they're good ideas, starting off on the wrong foot sometimes makes the end result incompatible with the policy making that this board is going to go through, or the way it's perceived in the public. I want to take a pause so that I can take the document that we were presented a week ago in the packet and share it with people in my district. I want to get their feedback. I want to hear what our boards and commissions, what staff say about the priorities and the metrics. I want to see what others find out when they do the same thing. And I want to have a thoughtful place where we can collect that feedback, synthesize it, and have a thoughtful way to make amendments to incorporate that feedback into a strategic plan. So I will be voting in favor of postponing. Thank you.
Supervisor Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will weigh back in with Supervisor, the two supervisors that spoke earlier, and that is John Hens as well as Supervisor Rachel Dowling. We sat in several meetings, and again, as representing the constituents of each of our districts, my challenge for all of you, if we have a new leader in this room as a county executive, do we change what we believe? We've laid out what we believe our constituents need for the next few years. Strategic plans by very nature are long-lasting, and they're not like a windsock. When a new leader comes in, you change your strategy. That's tactics, and we're mixing tactics up with strategy. And again, this framework is set up broadly enough that we can adapt to the environment that we have, including a new leader. So my challenge for all of you is, are your minds really going to change with the election? The county executive who implements the strategy could change, maybe not, but the reality is we set the policy. So I'm voting in favor of moving forward. Thank you.
Supervisor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hintz brought up an interesting point, coming from a background of planning and zoning and that sort of thing. When you get into comprehensive plans, and you get into future land use plans and that sort of thing, we always bring a public audience in, having public meetings to stir up some questions, to have some answers, to learn how we're now developing a strategy around the people. If you don't gather your people around you, your constituents around you, then how can we really find out what kind of strategy we want? And I think, too, if you let it rest a week and you go into the next month after the election, you have an opportunity to get some other people involved in posting this sort of comprehensive look at strategy and look at the priorities. And I think that's something you're going to really need as you go forward. Have a public hearing. It is a public thing that we're doing.
Supervisor Stafford.
There we go. There you go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I consider the two major points of view, I definitely see both points. Though I do wonder, it seems like we have a lofty goal in terms of gaining the input from staff and constituents, which I think we should do. I don't know if 2 months is enough time to do that. I think we've spent, what, 1.5 years, 2 years? It seems like it's been like 4 to get to the point where we're at. And so I guess I have to think through the clarity of what we're trying to do. So if we're trying to delay it by 2 months so we can give the new or the potentially new county executive time to digest this, okay, that's one thing. But if we have a true concern that we haven't engaged our constituents or engaged staff to the degree that we need to, then I think there should be a discussion of what that timeline should look like. Because I'm telling you right now, I mean, 2 months is not enough time to do that, to do it well within a strategic framework. Because you have to get that feedback, you have to think about the feedback, and then you have to apply it. And that applying part takes quite a bit of time for someone who's done a fair amount of strategy work. So I think, for me, I'm trying to decipher those two things. And so I think that's some consideration as we think about that. And the other is, being through this process as long as I have, I do feel like this is pretty dialed into at least the conversations I've had with my constituents. I'm hoping that you've all had conversations. You try, sometimes it's a little difficult. I get that, totally get that. But this is something that's been ongoing. And I know that I take that opportunity often to talk to people about what's going on, what's their needs. These are not new things. So that's the other question I have is, honestly, are these the right things? I mean, we are representatives, right? So we speak for, 4,500 or so people, right? We should know that as well. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't have engagement. I think we should. I think it's critical for a proper functioning society, totally. But I think we also have to put some of that back onto us as well in saying, is this the right direction? And that's what we're talking about here, is direction. There's still going to be plenty of time for us to actually put together programs and initiatives to support these things. But this is the vision. And we have to also understand, on that one last note, when you ask people about vision, they're going to have a hard time answering that question. They're going to have a very hard time answering that. That's why we have to look at the feedback and synthesize and understand what this all means. So if we're going to start the process over or add a loop, that's awesome, but we have to also think through what that really means, so we're not just sitting here 2 months from now saying, oh, I guess we need more time, because then we're not going to get anything done. And then we're not talking this year anymore because budget started. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Supervisor Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to echo some of the thoughts that I've heard from many of my my fellow board members. I think I'm going to vote in favor of tabling this till a date certain. I disagree with Supervisor Fari about the reasoning behind it. I don't think a change in administration should guide a strategic plan like this. I do feel like we are probably the best representatives to speak for the people, or speak on behalf of our constituents. They put us here for that reason. However, I do believe that now that we have a document that we can take back to our constituents to show them a general base idea, I feel like 2 months is a reasonable amount of time. I am concerned that pushing it much further down the line than that, we may start to lose momentum on this. And I would hate to invest as much time and effort into this as we have and then fumble it at the goal line and not pick it up because we've had a change in administration. So I do think 2 months is a reasonable amount of time to get community feedback, and any more than that, I think we're going to wind up just arguing with ourselves. So thank you.
Supervisor Halber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to be voting in favor of tabling this. I think that these issues have been issues long before many of us were even voted in. We know what the issues are in our communities, and for us to say that we need to engage further with our communities to find out what those issues are speaks to us as community leaders. I couldn't imagine anyone coming forward and saying like, oh, housing is not an issue that should be on this docket, or, you know, the quality of life. No, I love my quality of life. I don't think that should be a focus. I don't think 2 months is going to produce the type of feedback and engagement that you're looking for. All of our meetings are open to the public. All of our minutes, all of our documents are open to the public. So if you're looking for the feedback and the community engagement aspect, not to discourage anyone or say anything negative about our community, but we already see the level of community feedback and engagement that they have in our meetings and stuff. They put us here for a reason, to deal with these issues on their behalf, not to have to engage and come to the table every single time there's an issue that comes up. Thank you.
Supervisor Bureau, second time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to build on what Supervisor Halliburton just said. I grew up in the East Coast, and there was a game called Kick the Can, and I think we're kicking the can down the road. I challenge everybody to look at these pillars and say, does this pass the common sense test? We each are supposed to be integrating in our communities. We can hold public meetings, and we'll have 3 people show up, maybe. People don't even vote, folks. Come on. So, I mean, think that we're going to have these massive public meetings and forums. We represent people. We're interacting with our communities on a daily basis. I suggest that we have the courage to move forward. We spent almost a year and a half on this. Let's move forward. Thank you.
Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really haven't decided yet which way I'm going to vote on this, but I think the priorities are not what I brought to the table. I mean, all the items, all the pillars are correct, but I think they're just in the wrong order, and some of them are worded wrong. So I would really like to have more input on the order, because this is not what the things that I brought up. You know, the order's not right.
Supervisor Laux.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 2 points quickly. The first is, it's a living document. It's not set in stone. It can change. The second thing is, I believe in fall, we were told to find out what the priorities of our communities were. And I know that I took that seriously. I went to all the Common Council meetings, all the school board meetings. I canvassed. I follow Menasha for You on Facebook and interact with that. I also post to Facebook, and they can text me. So I made sure to find out the priorities before I went to the workshop. I don't see why we have to wait on this. Thank you.
Supervisor Holt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Kate. I want to reiterate how important it is for us to set this direction. I do believe that the pillars/priorities are correct. Whether or not they're in the correct order, I don't know. And I don't know that we have to decide that. And for that matter, we could take the numbers off. I think it's a matter of, are these the right priorities for our county? And I believe I already know that. However, as a responsible representative to my community, I am going to take this back and attempt to engage and get feedback on it. And whether we do this as part of the living document or we do it in some official capacity where we're bringing it back in March or April, as Supervisor Skellinger said, I think, to me, this is the right direction, and I'm not in favor of delaying it. I think we know what our constituents want.
Supervisor Hancock Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree that these are the priorities that I think we have. I can tell you, Last summer, I did a farmer's market intercept. I had everybody voting. Remember, we were asked about what your priorities were on the sheet for priority-based budgeting. I had people voting in jars with pennies, and nobody voted for efficient government. Nobody. That's not a priority for our constituents, even though they need it. Quality of life got overwhelmingly the most number of votes. So, and transportation and housing and economic development, nobody thought about that either, trust me, and nobody in the farmer's market did. But it is very hard to get feedback from your constituents on a regular basis. Nobody wants you knocking on their doors generally. But I think it is still our job. Government is slow and sloppy. It's messy because it's hard to get the work done to do the right thing for our constituents. I don't think there's going to be huge change. I think it is still our job to make the effort to communicate with our city governments and our constituents to make sure that they agree with these topics. So I will be voting to delay.
Supervisor O'Brien.
Call the question.
We'll try it, voice vote first. All those in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Nay. We'll do it by machine. I know which way it is, but we'll do it by machine. We got her, I think. That was passed 24 to 10. So the question has been called. So now we got Chuck's motion. Postpone to what date? Yes.
May 20th, 25.
The business meeting?
Yep.
Mr. Chairman, can I get a point of clarification on something? Because there were some things that were said that were incorrect.
What?
I checked with them. Everything is listed randomly. It is not listed in a specific order. That is not a set order. It's
Who
completely
did you
random.
check with? Well, we're up here.
Can you come up and speak to the question I asked?
We usually don't do this, just so you know. I don't know where this come out of.
Well, there were incorrect things being said, and we can't really vote on something if we don't understand
Need
the
an answer?
correct.
Right, we're already voting, so I don't know. The vote's
I asked,
already up there.
I was trying to get your attention before you put the vote up.
Right.
It wasn't debate, it was a clear point of clarification.
Oh, the motion to postpone it. Oh, sorry.
Okay, the motion is postponed is what we're voting on now, to May 20th of 2025 at the business meeting.
As a point of clarification. Where's mine?
I'm in the
What's that?
That failed 9-25. Now we'll be back on the regular one. So now we're voting on adopting the 2025-2029 Winnebago County Strategic Plan. Vote by machine.
So, is there no discussion?
Yep, we got to give her a second. I didn't tell her that before.
Yeah.
Right.
Point of order.
Before we vote, we can go ahead and have discussion. Correct? Great. Supervisor Hintz, now you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you please come up and clarify anything, Ms. Rao? Because I know there was at least one thing that was incorrectly assumed as far as the order of things in the pillars and so on.
Yes, I believe there was maybe a statement made that one of the assumptions was that it was in order of importance, those kind of things. It is not. Those are just 1 through 5. These are what we discussed. These were the pillars that we were discussed. It's not in any order whatsoever.
Is that all there was? Supervisor Nussbaum?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The goals are in order, or goal 1, goal 2, goal 3.
They're not. They're just 1, 2, 3. They were not in any order of importance. Yeah, it was just the format that we put them in. They weren't in any of order of importance right now. This is just the starting point. Sure.
Supervisor O'Brien? No. Supervisor Hintz, were you taken care of? Supervisor Nelson? Question's been called. Is there a second? Second. Motion made and seconded to call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Carried. Right, we'll vote by machine now. That is passed 32-2, or 32-0. Two abstentions, right. Okay, with everything being done on that end, I, as chair, will entertain a motion to convene the County Board of Supervisors into closed session for the discussion on. Okay. How about 4.5?
Run.
Well, go ahead. We're taking a short potty break if anybody has to go. I was gonna let yours stay up, staff stay in. Can we have the doors closed and back, please? Yep. Yeah. I don't know how you get it. I will. Just trying to get everybody out first. Okay, the only ones in here at this time should be John and his staff and Corporation Counsel and her staff. So, in the board. I, as County Board Chairman, will entertain a motion to convene the County Board Supervisors into closed session for discussion on the closure of the UWO Fox Cities campus under Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent E, deliberating or negotiating for the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specific public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session.
Chairman, so moved.
Second, Frankie. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify, oops, gotta have roll call, I'm sorry.
Supervisor Dowling. Here. Supervisor Lux. Here. Supervisor Albrecht. Yes. Supervisor Lutz. Here. Supervisor Holt. Yes, here. Supervisor Ranky. Here. Supervisor Hancock Cook. Here. Supervisor Wise. Yes. Supervisor Nussbaum. Here. Supervisor Stafford. Here. Supervisor Patterson. Here. Supervisor Gabbert is absent. Supervisor Binder. Here. Supervisor Swan. Here. Supervisor Gilbertson. Here. Supervisor Miller. Here. Supervisor Halber. Here. Supervisor Ponzer. Here. Supervisor Belleville. Here. Supervisor Mako. Here. Supervisor Hintz. Present. Supervisor Zelmer. Yes. Supervisor Skellinger. Supervisor Buck. Here. Supervisor Powers. Here. Supervisor Hanson. Aye. Supervisor Cox. Here. Supervisor Gustafson. Supervisor Bureau. Here. Supervisor Fari. Yes. Supervisor Harrison. Here. Supervisor Frisetto. Supervisor Egan, or Chairman Egan.
Yes.
Supervisor O'Brien. Here. Supervisor Nelson. Present. And Supervisor Miller.
Yes. County Executive Damel.
Yeah, see, everything shut off?